Hello learners, I'm back with my next video, that is interrupt driven input output. So in the last video we have discussed the programmed input output, and here the second method of modes of IO transfer, that is interrupt driven input output. So what was the disadvantage of the first programmed input output method? The first method, that is programmed input output, it is that the processor is busy all the time. It is doing busy waiting to just check the status of the IO data, whether the data is ready to read or write. It is just wasting its time, its precious time, to check the status of the IO devices, right? So here in this method we are trying to overcome from that problem, that is the busy waiting problem of the CPU, which is actually degrading the level of performance of the entire system, because our CPU is the main thing, brain of the computer system. So which is actually waiting for a particular data, it is not done, it is not good, right? So for that, what interrupt driven input output mode of transfer do? It takes, once the processor issue an IO command to any IO module, the processor will not check the status of the input output device. It will go to perform any other task, or it will execute the different next instruction to be executed if it is not dependent on the last instruction, right? So processor will not wait, it will perform some other operation. It may switch to another process, or it may continue with the same process if the instruction or the IO which has been demanded by the processor is not required in other instruction after that. Okay, so processor will not be waiting there. So how do the processor know कि मेरा data आ गया है IO device से? So it will be because the IO module will interrupt the processor to request the service कि देखो जिस data की आपने demand की थी, that data is now available, you can use it. So when it is ready to exchange data, the IO device, whenever the IO device is ready to exchange data with the processor, it will interrupt the processor to request the service. Okay, so processor then executes the data transfer as before and then resumes its former processing. So let's see it through through a flow graph. Here you can see that CPU is started executing a process where it issues a read write command to IO. In the second step, that IO devices initiates its IO operation, and it is preparing its data. It's getting its input ready and output complete or error generate, anything can be done. Okay? During that time, processor is doing its own task. It can perform another operation. Okay? And once the data is ready, the input output device will interrupt the CPU. CPU will receive the interrupt and transfers the control to interrupt handler. What is that? See, if we have the program like this, we have multiple instruction. मान लो at instruction number 3 we got an IO operation. So तो IO initiate हो जाएगा, and then IO then processor starts executing another instruction, maybe the fourth instruction. When it was executing the fourth instruction, the input data which has been demanded here came back. ठीक है, जैसे ही वापस आता है तो वो interrupt करेगा, that IO device will interrupt the processor, and once the processor will be interrupted by the IO device, the processor will go to access the interrupt service routine. There देखेगा कि किसने interrupt किया, सही है कि नहीं, illegal तो नहीं है. If it is correct interrupt which is demanded, then it will take the actual action and then execute the instruction which is required and then come back to this position. है ना, मतलब इस interrupt service routine में जाने के पहले भी that processor has saved the context of that process, then it will go for servicing that interrupt, and then when it will service the interrupt, it will again store the context of the process again, and then it will start with the next instruction. in the program. So in this way, as you can see, CPU receives interrupt, receiving interrupt, transfers control to interrupt handler, that is interrupt service routine. Interrupt handler processes data, returns from interrupt, and then CPU resumes processing of interrupted task. Then it will resumes the processing of interrupted task, because it was on the fourth instruction, it was executing the fourth instruction. When the interrupt occur, it has to complete that instruction and then only it will go to the next instruction. So it has to first save the context here and then load the context before resuming the interrupted task, right? So this is interrupt driven input output, where the processor is not wasting its time, its valuable time, just to get the input or output data, just to get the data from the IO devices. Okay, so in this way, interrupt driven input output mode of transfer work. In the next video, we will be discussing about the direct memory access. That is a very important topic. I'll be giving the link of that video in the description box. Please do watch it, and if you understood this interrupt driven input output, please hit the like button and please subscribe to my channel. It takes lots of effort to make a video, so please do support. Thank you so much.